Good afternoon. Welcome to Seasonal Wire, the platform where we speak truth to power. We are looking at how the Ori Olokun that you see in the picture behind me there, how we got to UK from Nigeria from Wumonije, where it was found. Let us explore that. It's important that we know how this got here. And we need to that will establish the steps we need to take to make sure that this is returned back to Nigeria. So let's do that. Now, according to reports, the Ife head, the Ori Olokun, we know it as Ori Olokun, they call it the Ife head, the bronze head, was found by accident in 1938 at the Wumonije compound, Ife, during the house building works among 16 other brass and copper heads and the upper half of a brass figure. Most of the objects found in Wumonoje compound and neighboring areas ended up in the National Museum of Ife, but a few pieces were taken from Nigeria and are now in the collections of major museums. What they failed to tell you was that the that piece was taken away illegally. This should be in the National Museum of Ife right now because they know that we have a National Museum of Ife. They stated why wasn't this there? Now let's establish that. This particular Ife head, the bronze head, Ori Olokun, this particular one you see in the picture next there, that one, yeah, in the glass window in British Museum, yes, it was taken, taken from Nigeria by the editor of the Daily Times of Nigeria at the time, H. Maclear Bate. H. Maclear Bate. So a journalist came, saw the find when he was taking the pictures, obviously at the of this find, and took it away. He stole what belongs to Yoruba people. It must be returned. So we've established now that what we are looking at in that screen, in that video, in the behind the glass wall in British Museum is a stolen property that must be returned. It must be returned. The rightful home belongs in Ife. That's where it belongs. Now, so H. Maclear, probably H. Bate Maclear, they said probably, not probably. The fact is that it's in the British Museum, which means that he definitely sold it to the National Art Collection Fund. They paid him money for it. He's almost like a scout. So he's got a double. He's doing double job. Whilst in the daytime he's a journalist, and the nighttime he's scouting for what they can loot and fleece and go back to the UK with. This was in 1938 that he did this, and the National Arts Collection Fund paid him money. They paid him money for it, but they don't want to tell us that. That should come out as part of the finding as well. And then they passed it to on collecting. So they paid money for the loot and passed it to the British Museum. Tell me, what's the difference between our government, some people, some of our African leaders now, taking money from us, from the people of Nigeria, and then the banks here taking that money in and using it and keep it, making interest on top of that money, thereby denying the people to whom those money belongs that uh, the opportunity for those roads, that money to have been used for fixing the infrastructure. If they said no, of course they'll say, "Oh no, if I say no, we'll go somewhere else." There's no difference between this bronze head, Ori Olokun, and what is still happening. It's all that time is still happening today, till today. The politicians are Yoruba, Nigerian politicians are taking money to British banks on the same basis as when this bronze head, Ori Olokun, was stolen in 1938. So I wanted to establish that. Now we know the facts. We are calling, not calling, we are demanding for every single artifact stolen from Africa by the colonials. It must be returned. They have no moral standing whatsoever. Um, for as long as they keep hold of it, they must return every single one. And they cannot preach any morality about corruption, about behavior, about democracy, because there is nothing democratic about stealing what doesn't belong to you. It is stealing. And even in their Bible, the colonial Bible that they like to talk about, thou shalt not steal. This is daylight robbery. And also, we do not want our only must not have to go all the way to British Museum to see the bronze head that belongs to the people of Yoruba land. And it belongs in the museum of the National Museum of Ife. That's where it belongs. And now, what do you think? Now that you've had the case and we've established how this was stolen, and the name to bear in mind is a man called a journalist, a editor for Daily Nigeria Limited at the time, H. Maclear Bate. He stole it. Then he sold it to the National Arts Collections Fund, and they now give it to the British Museum where it is still today. That is stolen property that must be returned. What are your thoughts on this? Let's hear from you. You are, of course, watching Citizen AI, the platform where we speak to the power. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you see this as well? Do you agree with me that it's actually, in fact, stolen goods that must be returned? It must be returned, no questions, because it is affecting that. It's part of our spirituality, and nobody has the right, no country, no one has the right to hold on to what is a spiritual connection for Yoruba people. That's part of our deities, part of our royalty, and the spiritual it's interfering for it not to be back on our in the museum is actually impacting the spiritual connection that we've been needed, and the spiritual activity we need to that needs to be happening around that. So we're demanding for this to be returned. How do you see this? Let us have your thoughts. Yeah. So in closing, we would just really like to see all of this, cleared up. Make sure that it's returned, no question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Um, we must ensure that we speak up for our our rights, and we have a strong connection to the sculptures. Like I said, the Vatican have got over 10,000 of African artifacts that they must return, and it's the same thing. All the colonials have taken things from Africa, and yet they refuse to give it back. And we must now come together and ensure we put pressure on them. They have no moral standing whatsoever. They cannot come to preach about democracy, about morality, about any religious stuff. Nothing, because the foundational issue is this: they stole what they are, what is in their museums. All of it is stolen, and it must be returned back to Africa. And we demand for that back, rightly so. If anything had been stolen in from the UK, I would be the first in the front saying it must be handed back to the UK. Same thing we are doing in this case. How do you see it? Let us have your thoughts. You, of course, watching Citizen the platform where we speak through the power. Yeah, we demand to have that back. And don't forget, the name of the man who stole this story is the editor at the time for Daily Times Nigeria, H. Maclear Bate. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Citizen the platform where we speak to the power. Please subscribe, hit the notification button, give us thumbs up, help us reach more people. Share this broadcast. Let us have your thoughts on this. Thank you very much. And bye for now.